All right, you're a coffee maker fans. If you do your own service, I'm going to use this old trashed out brew group to give you a few tips and tricks in no particular order about how to disassemble and reassemble the unit. First I want to talk about the orientation of some parts when you put the thing back together. Now I'm going to call the brew group this side the drainage valve side, and I'm going to call this side the cup side. And there's a bunch of parts that have to be oriented correctly. The first thing is this gearbox. That little curvy cutout right there has to be on the drainage valve side when you put this back together, not this way. Make sure when you put the gearbox back in the frame, if you took it out, that you put that little curve toward the drainage valve. Now, same thing with this cup. If you look down in there, you can see there's a little curved cutout right there. And that curved cutout has to be on the drainage valve side. Now, same thing with the lower piston. It's got this little cylinder, and that little cylinder has to be on the drainage valve side. Don't stick it in this way. Put it in this way, because that little cylinder right there ultimately is going to wind up engaging that nipple like that. And if you put this piston this way, your machine's not going to work. So lower piston, that little cylinder has to be on the drainage valve side of the machine. And in fact, that little cylinder on the piston goes into that notch right there. So make sure you get everything oriented correctly when you put it all back together. Now the same thing goes with the upper piston. Down in there, you can see that little cylinder that's offset this way. That has to go in here with that little cylinder there. You can barely see it, toward the drainage valve. And then the riser tube goes in there and engages that little cylinder. And the top of the riser tube engages this piece right here. So that also needs to be that way when you hook it on the top here. This offset has to be offset toward the drainage valve. You can get every single one of these parts reversed if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. You can put every single piece in there completely back-asswards. So pay attention to the orientation of those parts when you put your brew group back together. Now the next tip has to do with disassembly regarding bushing management and circlip management, because you can lose these things. All right, here's a couple disassembly tips. First of all, don't do what I'm doing, and don't do this next to a sink, and definitely don't do it in a sink. Go to a workbench, put a towel down, and do all your work on a towel on a workbench. Don't do this. If you have to work next to a sink, or even worse, in a sink, be sure to plug it, because the first time you do this, you're probably going to screw up and drop some small parts, and if they go down the drain, you're going to wish that hadn't happened. All right. Now, when you take these side plates off, take off one at a time. Don't pop them both off at the same time. Take one off, and I'm going to show you why. All right, I've popped off the 4 tabs that secure the plate. You can see how to do that on other people's videos. And I'll set that aside. And I've already taken off the top cap. So I'm going to take this piece off. And when I take this piece off, I want this thing laying down flat on the surface. Because as soon as I pick this piece up, there's a bushing. And if you're holding this brew group up in the air at some weird angle, and you take this piece off, you could drop and lose that bushing. So pop off one side cap, have the thing flat on your work surface, take this guide rail up and off, and get that bushing. Don't lose it, don't drop it in the sink. Get hold of that thing. And at the very least, have some kind of parts cup. And better yet, get a magnetic one, a steel one that's magnetic. Now, there's a bushing on the other side of this pin also. And you're going to retrieve that bushing in the next step. Well, 2 steps from now. Now you can turn the thing over, pop this cap off, take the guide rail off, and retrieve that bushing. If you pop both of these side plates off at the same time and pop these guide rails off while you're holding this thing up in somewhere in the air, you're going to lose those bushings. That's why I say do it on a flat surface, on a towel, on a workbench, away from a sink, in case you do that. But if you do it the way I tell you, that's not going to happen. Take one side piece off, pull off the guide rail, get that bushing. Flip it over, take that side plate off, take off the guide rail, pick it up, grab the bushing, put it in your parts container. Now the next tip has to do with getting the side plates off and getting access to those tabs that you have to unclip. If this cup is all the way over this way, you won't be able to get access to that tab. So spin your wheel and get that cup moving that way. There, I've got the cup over here. Now look, this piece is out of the way and you can get access to that tab for that side plate. And the same tab would be here for this side plate that I already took off. Get the brewing cup out of your way. If it's all the way up this way, it's going to obscure your access to that tab right there. All right, so I loosen the tabs, take the side plate off. There's that bushing I don't want to lose. Pick up my guide rail with this brew group flat on its work surface, set that aside, get that bushing. Secure it. Put it in your parts cup or whatever. Now, we're going to get the bushings out from underneath these pins. It's easy. You just take some little tool, lift this up gently without breaking it, and you'll be able to get that bushing out. It's easiest done if you've got the gearbox in this position right here. You can lift this piece of the gearbox up and get under there and pull that bushing out. Up, bushing out. If you have this pin in some other location in the track, you can still do it, but it's easiest if you have this gearbox at this position in the track. Now we'll flip this over and do the same thing. I'm going to gently lift up this gearbox reach under there. The bushing's kind of stuck on the pin. Pull the bushing out and secure it in your parts cup. Now you got all 4 bushings and you didn't lose them. And hopefully you didn't drop them in the sink either. Now the next bit has to do with the circlip that holds this pivot pin. There's 2 circlips. I've only got one installed right now for instructional purposes. There it is right there. When you pull that circlip off, keep a finger in front of it, because when you get it loose, it's going to want to fly off under spring pressure and shoot that way across the room. So don't just stick a tool in there and flick that circlip out. You're probably going to lose it. Get your tool in there, lay it down, put your finger here, and control that circlip as you pop it off. See if I can navigate around the dog here and show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to reach in there, get my tool. I'm using my thumb. You can't see this very well, but I've got my thumb in front of that circlip. So when I pry it off, my thumb controlled it. It's under spring tension. It'll shoot across the room if you don't control it, and you'll lose it. So watch out for that. So this is not a full-on instructional video on how to overhaul your brew group. There's a bunch of videos you can find. Basically, I just wanted to show you how to be careful with your bushings and your circlips so you don't lose them. There's plenty of great videos to show you how to do this overhaul. But if you take off one side plate at a time, get your bushing, flip it over, pop the other side plate off, get your bushing, gently pull these up and get your bushings out from underneath so you don't lose them. Those are the key bits of this video.